Love did not arrive in Rose's life like fire. It arrived like shelter. By the time Evans asked her to dinner, not as colleagues, not as a joke, but with deliberate calm, Rose had already built 100 reasons not to go. Love was distraction. Love was vulnerability. Love asked for trust, and trust had once cost her everything. Yet, when he asked, there was no hunger in his eyes, no urgency, just patience. "All right," she said, "one dinner." They ate at a small restaurant tucked behind a row of mechanic shops, where the food was honest and the lighting merciful. They talked about work, about books, about the strange loneliness of cities built for millions. Evans spoke of his childhood in fragments: boarding school, a mother who died early, a father who believed in discipline. Nothing dramatic, nothing false. Rose told him even less. Still, something settled between them. They did not rush. Weeks passed before hands touched. Months before intimacy was spoken of. Evans never pressed for what Rose was not ready to give. When she withdrew, he let her. When she returned, he was there. She tested him without admitting it. She arrived late to see if he would complain. She cancelled plans to see if he would guilt her. She watched how he treated waiters, junior officers, strangers. He passed every test. That frightened her more than failure would have, because perfection hides things. One night, after a long operation, they sat in her flat. The lights were low. Rain drummed against the windows. "Why do you trust me?" Rose asked suddenly. Evans looked at her for a long moment. "Because you don't pretend to be good," he said. "You work at it." The word touched something inside her. She let him stay. Their relationship became known slowly. Like news people chose not to announce loudly. Some colleagues approved. Others watched with curiosity. A few warned her quietly. "Be careful," one woman said. "Good men are rare." Rose smiled politely. She did not explain that she was not looking for goodness. She was looking for safety. Evans provided it. With him, her nightmares softened. Her body relaxed. For the first time in years, she slept without the light on. They spoke of marriage cautiously, like people discussing a fragile object. "I don't need a big wedding," Rose said. "I don't need an easy marriage," Evans replied. They agreed on simple things: respect, privacy, honesty. Rose believed she had finally earned peace. They married quietly at a registry office, with a small church blessing afterward. Auntie Amaka attended, her eyes sharp with scrutiny. She hugged Rose longer than necessary. "This life you've chosen," Amaka murmured, "do not disappear inside it." Rose nodded. Evans wore his ring easily. So did she. Marriage did not change him. It changed Rose. She softened. She laughed more. She let herself imagine a future that did not revolve around pursuit. She began to think, dangerously, that the vow beneath the Iroko tree might one day be laid down. At work, she remained disciplined, but she was less severe with herself, less alone. Evans never asked about Akunsa again. She appreciated that. The first crack appeared quietly. It came in the form of a name. During a briefing on organized crime, a suspect's alias was mentioned, a name Rose had seen before, long ago, scribbled in the margins of an old file. Her stomach tightened. She glanced at Evans. His face remained neutral, too neutral. Later that night, she asked casually, "Have you ever heard of that name?" Evans shrugged. "Criminals recycle names. It doesn't mean anything." Rose nodded, but unease stirred. Small things followed. A phone call Evans took outside. A meeting he forgot to mention. A document he closed too quickly. Nothing provable, nothing dramatic, but Rose has survived by listening to silence. And silence, once noticed, grows loud. One evening, as Evans slept beside her, Rose stared at the ceiling and felt the old chill return. The same one she had felt the first time their eyes met. Recognition's shadow. She touched her wedding ring. Justice, she realized too late, does not always knock on the door. Sometimes it climbs into your bed and calls itself love. And when it finally speaks, it does not whisper, it shatters.
There are truths that announce themselves with evidence, and there are truths that announce themselves with memory. Rose had learned to trust both. After the briefing where the alias resurfaced, she began to feel watched, not by Evans, but by her own past. Old instincts stirred. The discipline she had relaxed returned, quietly reclaiming its place in her bones. She did not accuse, she did not confront, she observed. At home she became gentler, not colder. Predators, she knew, grew alert when they sensed distance. Evans noticed nothing unusual, or if he did not reveal it. At work, Rose began a parallel investigation, unofficial, meticulous, lonely. She pulled archived cases from different states, armed robberies, village raids, kidnappings disguised as communal clashes. Each file alone looked incomplete. Together they hummed with a familiar rhythm. Precision, timing, clean exits, leadership. She mapped dates on paper, locations, routes. She traced movements the way hunters trace footprints, not forward, but backward. Again and again she encountered obstruction, files missing, names redacted, offices transferred shortly after submitting reports. And always, somewhere near the center, stood institutions Evans had once worked with, units he had passed through quietly, operations he had survived untouched. Rose told herself she was being unfair. Love distorts perception, she reminded herself. So does fear. The dreams returned. Not the old ones, not the assault, not her parents' faces frozen in death. These dreams were different. They were symbolic, restless. She dreamed of a man wearing many faces, of hands washing blood in a river that never ran clear, of a wedding ring sinking into mud. She woke with her heart pounding and her mouth dry. Once, she rose from bed and stood over Evans as he slept. His face was peaceful, unburdened. She felt an ache that was not tenderness. She stepped away. I will not become reckless, she whispered to herself. The ancestors reward patience. The case that broke the dam came disguised as routine. A young man was arrested during a failed robbery in Lokoja. He was injured, frightened, and talkative, too talkative. Rose sat with him during interrogation, her voice calm, her eyes steady. Who trained you? She asked gently. The young man laughed bitterly. You think I would still be breathing if I said that? Rose leaned back. You're already breathing, she said. That means someone made a mistake. He studied her. You're different. So are you. You're alive. The silence stretched. Finally, he spoke. Not names, but patterns. A coordinator, a benefactor, a man who never got his hands dirty, a man who wore uniforms and shook hands with authority. Rose's skin prickled. Have you ever seen him? She asked. The young man hesitated, then shook his head. No, but I've heard his voice. Describe it. He closed his eyes. Calm, polite, like a teacher. Rose's breath caught. Evans had once told her, violence is easier to control when you remove emotion from it. She had admired the thought. Now it tasted like ash. That night, Rose did not go home. She stayed in her office, surrounded by paper and doubt. She replayed years of conversations, gestures, silences. She saw moments she had excused, words she had softened. The man she loved had never lied to her outright. He had simply never told the truth. By dawn, she had confirmed what her spirit already knew. A financial trail, complex, indirect, brilliant, led to shell companies Evans had access to through intermediaries. Communications logs placed his phone near multiple crime scenes years apart, always officially off-duty. He had not pulled the trigger, he had designed the gun. Rose sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. The vow beneath the Orokochi burned inside her chest, awake and merciless. She went home later that morning. Evans was in the kitchen, making tea. He smiled when he saw her. "You didn't come home," he said lightly. "I was worried." She watched him carefully, his posture, his breathing, the ease of his deception. "I was working," she replied. He nodded. "You always are." She moved closer and kissed his cheek. He stiffened for half a second, too brief to notice if you were not trained to notice. She smiled. The trap, she knew, would require more than evidence. It would require restraint beyond pain. Justice in her culture was not swift, it was thorough. And Rose had waited 10 years already. She could wait a little longer. That evening, Rose visited the river shrine again, for the first time in years. She knelt and pressed her palms into the earth. "I have found him," she whispered, "or he has found me." The wind stirred the water. "Guide me," she said. "Do not let love blind me. Do not let hatred rush me." In the reflection of the river, she saw her own face, older, harder, but unbroken. Justice had finally removed its mask, and it was wearing a wedding ring.